In this already multipolar world, without an empire, things could only be worse for the US dollar. It is ironic that it was the weakening of the sterling system that prompted on the one hand US ruling classes to aspire to replace the sterling system with a dollar system, but on the other hand signified the working of factors, the weakening of imperialism, as signified by communism and decolonization, that would ensure that the dollar system would never be stable, it would always be unstable. Without vast tribute-paying colonies, the US could never export substantial amounts of capital. It never did. The alternative method of providing the world with liquidity was to run deficits, and this was subject to the Triffin dilemma. First articulated by the Belgian economist Robert Triffin, testifying before Congress in 1960, he said that essentially there was a contradiction in the dollar system, which was contingent on the fact that a national currency is playing the role of an international currency. He says a sustained flow of dollars and liquidity fueling global trade implied continuous and persistent deficits in the US, consequently eroding confidence in the dollar and its reserve currency role, leading to instability. As we all know, this instability eventually ensured that the Europeans would not accept dollars of decreasing value, and they said, forget your dollars, give us gold instead. And gold flowed out of the US system at such a high rate that barely 3 years were to pass between European currencies becoming convertible and the US discovering it did not have enough gold to run the system. So already by 1961, the United States had to organize a gold pool in order to prop up, in order to back the dollar. And it tried expedient after expedient over the next decade, but within a decade it was very clear that the gold backing could not work. The United States had to throw in the towel and say we can no longer exchange dollars for gold. And today, after 2008, the era of easy monetary policy, low or zero interest rate policy, quantitative easing, etc., has actually led to what some people are calling the everything bubble. Practically every asset market is going nowhere but up, because simply there is so much money sloshing about the system that they have to find some assets to invest in. And how unhealthy this is, you will see by the fact that while the asset markets are going this way, every economic indicator of the productive economy is going in the opposite direction. This is a completely unsustainable situation. And this, by the way, the everything bubble was inflated, and the everything bust has also started. Over the last many years, a number of asset markets are deeply in trouble. Commercial real estate is only the latest, but there is private equity, there is many other assets, and US Treasury market has softened. So, since 1971, these financializations have been the problem. So, essentially, even when it seemed to work after a fashion, say up to about the early 2000s, the US financial system was riddled with many problems. It required a very high degree of financialization, drawing money away from productive investment, both in the United States and elsewhere. Secondly, it undermined the productive economy, direct consequence of the first. Thirdly, it led to even more volatility and recurring financial crisis, including for many third world countries, currency crisis, because their currencies would go up in value every time US investors decided that they wanted to bring money into Turkey or India or where have you. And then suddenly the US Federal Reserve, for example, raised interest rates, all this money would drain out, leaving a currency crisis for these countries for reasons that had nothing to do with the health of the country's economy. Completely extraneous. So you cannot really manage an economy for development under these circumstances. Last but not least, this system has led to wars. Several wars of recent times, from Libya to Iraq, have been at least partly a result of the fact that the rulers of these countries were exploring ways of leaving the dollar system, which they knew was not in the interest of the countries which they were leading. This is the US Federal Reserve balance sheet. The Federal Reserve balance sheet was at about $1 trillion right up until the 2008 financial crisis. Then it went from 1 to a little over $2 trillion. Then it kind of remained there, but with quantitative easing and whatnot, it rose to about $4 trillion. Then in recent times with the pandemic and the vast, the tsunami of liquidity which the Federal Reserve has visited upon the system, it went to nearly $9 trillion. And given how soft the treasury market is, the Federal Reserve is going to have to buy more of these reserves. So in these ways, the Federal Reserve has supported swooning asset markets. But now, as I've already said, the return of inflation, which is itself a result of its unproductive predatory economy, decline of imperial power, is putting the Federal Reserve on the horns of a dilemma. So essentially what we are looking at is a situation in which the financial crisis, the bursting of the everything bubble is already underway. There are any number of triggers. They can be economic, financial, social, political, geopolitical, that can trigger a knockdown crisis. And this knockdown crisis is going to very seriously set back the dollar. And of course they also say that RMB, can the RMB be a successor? They say, but the Chinese authorities are unable and unwilling to internationalize the renminbi. RMB is being internationalized, that's fine, and it will be internationalized. I have no doubt it will play a very important role, but it should not be internationalized on the pattern of the US dollar. If it is, China will essentially suffer the same consequences as Britain and the United States have suffered vis-a-vis their productive economies.